This is Panorama at Praxis Modular, where we discuss developments, opportunities, and insights into the latest technology and trends in the modular construction industry.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Panorama podcast. Today on the show, we have Jeffrey Amengual, the president and CEO of Praxis Modular. Jeff, thanks for being here.
Hi, Richard. It's good to be here today.
So, Jeff, just to start us off at the top, for a lot of people who may not be familiar with modular housing, can you give us a quick overview of what modular is?
Absolutely, Richard. So most people are familiar with conventional construction, the type of construction that happens out at the job site. Numerous people come in, they pour the foundation, they, frame up the buildings with wood framing, they put on the sheeting or bricks. It's sort of the sticks and bricks approach to construction. Well, modular is different in the fashion that instead of doing it out in the field, the majority of the work is done within a factory setting. So it's outside the weather elements, it's away from the job site, and it's done in a controlled environment, which is very important to the process.
And there's been a lot of growth in modular housing in recent years. Can you share some of the geographic markets where you're seeing modular builds become a lot more prevalent?
So you might notice that there's a lot of companies set up to do modular housing in the Northeast and also in the West. And the reason is the demand for residential housing is great in those areas. So developers have recognized that modular manufacturing is a good solution for construction delivery, and they're doing it, really up and down the Eastern Seaboard as well as the West.
And as far as Praxis, your focus in the industry, can you tell us a little bit about some of the projects that Praxis works on and the specific markets that you're excited about?
Absolutely. So we have a number of projects in the region. One is located in New Jersey, and it's a residential project. It's going to be about 300 units. Very excited about that. In addition to that, we have two student housing projects. These are off-campus student housing. One is located up in Ithaca, New York, and the other is located in Albany, New York. So they're dynamic projects. They're each involve more than several hundred boxes or units, and we're marching forward and getting those ready to be built.
Within the property tech space overall, the space has really grown a lot in recent years, and there are a lot of investors that are deploying new money into property tech and to modular specifically. Could you share a little bit about what's attracting investors to modular and what's on the horizon for the industry?
So what developers are finding is that the system of modular manufacturing is a great advance over conventional construction. And modular manufacturing is advancing itself as an industry and going from sort of the conventional construction process indoors to doing automation type process where they're using an assembly line approach to the manufacturing of homes. Praxis, we take it another step forward because not only are we using automation, but now we're using high tech in the form of robotics and other systems to advance the process of manufacturing.
Okay. So Jeff, there are a lot of big tech companies that have been making investments into modular recently. Could you talk a little bit about what they're seeing in the space?
So Richard, you're exactly on point. Companies like Google, Tesla, Amazon, they're all very interested in the space. And there's two reasons behind that. Number one is they have to support their workforce housing. There's a deficiency in housing throughout the nation, particularly in areas that they're located. And number two, they see this as a great investment vehicle because what they're doing is changing the systems of conventional construction to a manufacturing process. And Tesla is very familiar with that. They know how to go and automate and manufacture in a grand way. And they see that as being an area in the construction industry that should change to take the benefit of those systems. Automate, using robotics, just-in-time philosophy. It really is just a new view towards the methods of construction for homes.
So if I'm a developer or an investor who's considering a modular build for a project that I'm doing, where should I start? What should the decision-making process look like?
Well, I think first you want to examine, the risk factor. And when you're looking at conventional construction, there are a number of risks. The weather is a factor. The lack of labor in a given market may be a factor. It's also the rising costs of materials. When you're dealing with modular manufacturing, number one, some of those risks are mitigated because it's built indoors, number one. Number two, you have a consistent labor force working on projects on a consistent basis throughout. And in terms of commodities, manufacturers have a better access to commodities than the construction industry as a whole. So all of these are benefits that the developer will receive as a result of changing over their system from conventional construction to modular.
And when you look at the horizon over the next 5 years for the industry, what's some of the innovation in modular that you're most excited about?
Well, I think the speed to delivery is number one, which is key because of the requirements of building, housing all over the United States. There's, obviously there's a backlog for housing. So the ability to build, quality product in a faster vein is first and foremost. But it's also the utilization of new technologies, new materials in a way that we haven't seen before. So all of those are advances that are key. But probably the biggest focus right now is on the environment and the utilization of materials that are environmentally friendly and that they can be recycled back in or repurposed for future housing. So I think that's the paradigm shift that we're looking at. That's the benefit not only for developers and investors, but that's the social benefit as well.
And could you talk a little bit about what the benefits to the U.S. economy are? Because we've been experiencing a lot of housing shortages, labor shortages of recent. So what role can modular play in being able to help some of those issues?
Well, as you know, construction as it stands right now is one of the largest industries in this country. But it's an industry that is fraught with peril on a lot of levels. Number one, labor shortages, material shortages. The modular industry sort of resolves some of those issues because, number one, as I said before, there's a better control over labor. When you start to automate it, your efficiencies go up and your reliance on, cyclical labor is diminished. In terms of commodities, you have better control of commodities. You're buying things just in time at a higher level and more efficient level. So there's a number of things that we look to in the modular industry, particularly going forward, that will benefit the U.S. economy. And the growth of modular construction in the economy will be significant over the next 5 to 10 years.
And is there a piece of advice that you would share for somebody who's just getting into the modular industry? You've been doing this for a long time. What's a piece of advice that you would share?
You look at the automotive industry, use that as an example of how to proceed. Look at the automotive industry for its technology, for its lean, processes, just-in-time philosophy, buying commodities at, in the proper vein, also creating components. So instead of trying to think of entire systems, break things down to more simple components, making sure those components are complete, and then utilize that as an assembly. It's a big challenge. There's a lot to be considered in doing that, but if you're going to be in this business, that's absolutely a requirement in order to succeed.
Good advice. So Jeff, we always like to close out the interview with a more personal question to help listeners get to know you better. So what's one thing that you enjoy doing outside of the modular construction business?
Well, I'm a geek. So, what I like to do is draw up solutions, design things that robots are going to do. So, my time is spent in really working on, those technical challenges, and I enjoy doing that.
All right, Jeff, thanks for coming on the show today.
My pleasure.
And everybody listening, thanks for joining us on the Panorama podcast. We'll see you next time.
That concludes this episode of the Panorama podcast at Praxis Modular. Thank you very much for listening.